don't think that it should be illegal to engage in, quote, incitement to hatred, unquote, in and of itself. That is to say, people ought to be allowed in a democratic society to hate as well as love. And they ought to be allowed to think very badly of other people for just about any reason in the world. Now, that's something different, in my view, than incitement to violence. And sometimes the same speech will be both. But I think we have to be very careful when we talk about concepts, legal concepts, such as laws designed to prevent incitement to hatred. Now, it is true, as the last speaker correctly observed, that in the area of what I'll call hate speech, there is a different European and American approach. Indeed, there is a uniquely American approach, which is shared nowhere else in the world, so far as I know, in terms of the degree of protection we afford to, quote, hate speech as well as other speech. When President Carter signed the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, he annexed a reservation saying that this would not give authority to any state or the federal government to pass any law inconsistent with the Bill of Rights, which is a way of saying in polite diplomatic language, thanks but no thanks. We'll do our best, but we're not going to pass laws aimed at speech in this area. Now, one line on why I think we think about this a little bit differently. First, or two lines. First, we do have a different history. Europe has been ravaged by the results of certain types of speech. And Europeans, much more than Americans, saw that speech when it was being voiced and understood and understand the potential dangers of it. From an American perspective, I think we are more concerned not about taking away someone's right to say something interesting. We're more concerned about giving the government the power to do it. We're more concerned about entrusting to Congress, entrusting to the courts, entrusting to any government entity the authority to say that speech, that particular speech, is so offensive, so beyond the pale, so inherently threatening that we will not allow it. I mean, from my own view, we allow the protection of hate speech, as in the Skokie case, not because we think the speech has any value at all. It is not valuable, and it is, to some degree, dangerous. We don't want government involved, though, in the decision-making process about what's valuable, what's dangerous, how to strike a proper balance. So, sure, on the outskirts, we will say, yes, incitement to violence with the intent that there be violence and the likelihood that there'll be violence, sure, in that sort of case, we'll say it can be banned. But just about nowhere else. And so I view it as our being willing to pay the price of hate speech, not getting the benefits of it, the price of hate speech in return for avoiding the dangers of government intervention into this very, very difficult and fragile area.
Well, I think we're going to start having a real discussion now. Mr. Gobert actually had a short, un petit mot, and then Mr. Sifawi, Madame Fauré, and Mr. Swearingen.
I'll let you be the judge. A few months ago, we had discussion at the European Parliament on homophobia. Should one legislate against homophobia? And some MPs said no. Just listen, I do not like monkeys. Should we vote a law against hatred of monkeys? And when you hear these sorts of things, yes, a law was voted against homophobia because we had to do it in view of the way in which, in some countries, in a number of countries, homosexuals are attacked, physically attacked and verbally attacked. And so we had to vote this law because we had to protect homosexuals, as we would do this also to protect other groups of the population who are under threat in certain countries. Mr. Sifawi, now as far as I'm concerned, in a democracy you can and you may say anything except advocate hatred, advocate the negation of others, and incite violence against others because of real or supposed differences between ourselves and the others. Now, this happens to be a topic that I'm very, very interested in. Earlier on, when I arrived here by tram, I've just finished reading Mein Kampf, and I bought the book of a friend, Antoine Wittkin, who's just written a remarkable book of inquiry into Mein Kampf. He explains how Hitler wrote this book. Now, Hitler had the nerve to say what he thought, and not only that, but to justify it. It was a political project in which he reveals the very basis of his thought, his ideology. In other words, the words have to be used. We're talking about ideology. Ideology. People who want to defend or criticize certain ways of in which Islam is attacked they're not doing this because they are very spiritual people, but because they're defending an ideology. They want to instrumentalize their religion for political purposes and ideological purposes. So it is becoming very important to stop any attempt to forbid or prohibit criticism of extreme views which are being imposed on the world as a whole. I'm going to try and be brief, but it's a very complex subject. Now let's start at the beginning. I have never heard anyone criticize the fact that Muslims pray 5 times a day. I've never heard anyone say, well, it's completely stupid to go to Mecca on a pilgrimage. I have heard more people say it was stupid to go to Lourdes, for example, or that it was not very progressive to go to Mass once a week. In fact, I've heard far more people criticizing the fact that people use the Quran and promise to terrorists blowing themselves up a large number of virgins when they get to paradise. I think there needs to be a criticism of those who want